Hi, thanks. Thanks for coming along. As Tim said, I'm from Tier Fund. My role is the Education and Advocacy Manager, so I don't have to worry about raising money, which is great. And one of the things that my team gets to do around the journey of justice, more than just giving to an agency. Sometimes we can give, and that's a really good way into the question of justice. But sometimes that can mean we do something at arm's length. So we're interested at Tier Fund at bringing that whole question of how justice intersects with our faith, more than just around giving, but also around how we learn, how we act on behalf of the poor, how we get involved in community work ourselves. So what I want to do first actually is I really believe in connection before content. So I'm just going to ask you to talk to someone. If you could find someone you don't know and just say who you are, what's your name, where you're from, what's brought you to this seminar, and what do you think is the greatest justice challenge for New Zealand and also globally? I'm sure there'll be lots of variety of answers on that. We'll just kick that around. Okay, let's just have a few answers of what you felt was the greatest justice challenge. I know that for some of you will come from all different varieties of beliefs and backgrounds, so there'll be lots of variety, I reckon. What are some of the things?
Inequality.
Okay.
In countries and between countries.
Yes. Okay. Yep. So you've got rich countries versus poor countries. So you've got a massive. New Zealand's huge. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you've probably seen Nigel Latta documentaries on inequality. Yeah, that really highlights that point. Okay. Thank you. Other things? Or other people concerned about that? Is that something that's on people's minds? Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Also the inequitable sharing of wealth.
Yeah. Okay. So again, so real strong inequality. Yeah. Okay. Yep. Thank you.
It stems from the capitalist system and the monetary system, which creates money as debt, and we're all having to pay more and more amounts of debt. So. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, and a lot of people are now. They're not necessarily really poor, but their debt is actually just that weight on them. Yeah.
And then there's the rundown of social services which don't return a huge profit.
Okay, right.
And consequently people suffer because they have their letters delivered in time or at all.
Okay.
And anything which is really socially useful doesn't return a huge income in the case of the state enterprises.
Okay.
Tends to be downplayed. You know, what's the bottom line seems to be the common question.
Okay, yeah. So what is good for business is sometimes good for people, but not always. And when it's not, and those services get eroded, then we lose our what they call social capital. Yeah. Yep.
And its implications for the level of foreign aid.
Right. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Any others? Yeah.
Access, and it can be accessible to education or justice systems.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So because sometimes it's a little bit like the inequality question, I suppose. You can sometimes around, but some people are just denied access in some ways. Sometimes that's physically denied it, and other times it's actually the ways to get access is made to be somehow shameful, and so it's actually quite difficult then to have access. Yeah, well, I think this is run right through the Bible. There's that big question of what do we do with our resources? We have something, and we have an obligation to share. But of course, often people are thinking in terms of got to get the most for myself. Maybe out of fear, a bit worried that if they don't do that, then they won't have a secure retirement. But thinking about accumulation rather than that question of I guess, the fairness between people, but also how can we be generous as well? Yeah.
The question of access
Yep.
is a very interesting thing. When we have a social welfare state, or a road or as it may be,
Yeah.
but you also create a type of access problem where people have to go through quite a number of hoops to obtain that.
Yep.
And people at the bottom that need the most are least able to jump through the particular set of hoops in the right order.
Right.
I've seen that even just trying to get, a professional on a good wage in Australia. I have to go through the same system to obtain the childcare subsidy because of what it's done over there. And I just can't imagine being at the bottom end, having to navigate that system and get through it correctly, because I certainly couldn't get through it correctly.
Yeah. Okay. That's a really good example of that barrier to access. Yeah.
Overall, I think it's the biggest difference governments do not take responsibility for their people.
Okay.
That's
Right.
just, to me, that covers. If they took responsibility, we wouldn't have refugees.
Right. Okay. So not just here, but globally, they're not taking responsibility. Yeah. Sure. Okay. Yeah. That's right. We have a lot of examples that are run mainly by people who are creaming off the resources. I've done. Years ago, I was working for an anti-corruption organisation based in London, and then spent a year in Jerusalem working for it as well, and did a lot of work around Africa, and found that there are so many occasions where that is exactly what's happening. The governments are not there really to serve especially their poorest people, and there's this funnel of corruption and the money just flows off and into these European banks at the rate of trillions of dollars a year. So yeah, you're right. They don't think of themselves as serving the people. Yeah.
Sorry, can I just say that some people are having a little difficulty in hearing?
Oh, sure. Okay. Hearing me? Should I speak up? Okay. Yeah, it's got really windy, so there's a bit of flapping. Yeah. Okay. Sure. Okay. And also, if you speak, if you could speak up as well. Yep.
Yes, but taking that enormous picture and bringing it back close to home, we're seeing that now being reflected in the style in the common economy, and even those with resources like fishing resources are encouraged to sell it off to China or whatever, Taiwan or wherever, and then we're actually getting it now in New Zealand. I'm an old trained geographer, but we now have that primate city, which I was taught about 50 years ago was the symbol of a third world economy, the one primate city creaming everything off and all the rest, and now we've got that in Auckland, and that's the primate city, and within that I work with migrants, not refugees. They come to me voluntarily and pay us a fee to learn how to understand New Zealand culture as well as speech and what we need. And I'm getting all of these people who used to be Chinese, now the dominant group is India, and they're coming in and they have no idea of our values, our culture, our talking to neighbours, sharing. They have to learn all of this because they've had to look after number one and number one's family, and that's how they survive in Norman come from. And that worries me that we are getting this great dominant group, mainly in Auckland, but elsewhere, and that's being reflected on the whole system.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. I'm the Aucklander too. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. So that's an incredible range of issues, and I'm really glad that there are so many people here who actually feel that, because actually one of the things, and I'll talk about this a bit later, one of our problems I think is that we actually find sometimes these things are so big that we actually switch off and we refuse to feel, but it just sounds like there's a lot of passion here. Let me tell you a little bit about just where we want to go in the next hour. What I'd like to do is firstly just do a little bit of a recap and just ask that question about faith and justice. Most of you would have maybe heard what I had to say earlier on today. We'll just do a little bit of discussion around that. Then I really want to get us to look at this question of where is injustice in our own lives, and that whole question of how do we hold the injustice and not cause that to be a reason that we switch off, but in fact a reason that we switch on. And then finish with a little bit of questions around what can we actually do? And how do you find out what you yourself might be called to, or your church might be called to as well? So that's really where I want to head today. Let me start with just one quick story. In America, this is about 5 or 6 years ago. I was living here, but I was flicked on American television station when I was staying somewhere, and they have Sky. I don't have Sky, but this place had Sky, and it was a TV evangelist, and he was boasting that he raised $100 million for his ministry through his television evangelism. But then he said that he himself lives really frugally. He only gets 2% of that for his own personal income. And you quickly do the maths, right? 2% of 100 million? Well, I can live on that, right? That'll be easy. Go down south, 3,000 kilometers to Colombia, another evangelist. This man is working in Colombia. He's been in this community for quite some time. He's taken a job working in the fields as he helps the pastor part-time. And he often has meals with different members of the community, and they just take him and feed him, because he doesn't have that source of income other than that. And one day he sits down with one family, and in front of him they put 2 potatoes, boiled potatoes, and 2 hard-boiled eggs. And the story, as you'll see in a sec, only works with hard-boiled eggs. So he looks around for a little while, and he realizes as he's about to tuck into this meal, and he's thinking, "Gosh, that's not a lot to eat." But he realizes that the rest of the family haven't sat down with him. And he starts to ask, "Well, are you going to eat with us, with me? Are we going to eat together?" And there's a bit of embarrassed silence, and a lot of those cultures, that's a tricky question to put on the table. But eventually he finds out that actually they don't have much more food, and they were going to feed him and then have almost nothing themselves later. So he gets out a knife and he cuts those potatoes into 4, both of them, so there are 8 pieces for the family. And then he cuts the eggs, and this is why it only works if they're hard-boiled. He cuts those eggs up as well, 1 piece for each member of the family, and they eat together. And what struck me about putting those 2 stories together, or the 2 stories when I heard them, was I suspect that the way someone lives and the amounts that they consume and all these things that are actually basic to our lifestyle actually have a large effect on how open our hearts are to other people. I suspect that there's that connection between what we're prepared to do and what we're prepared to share, and how we actually see the heart of God and the heart of Christ in the world. This morning, when I spoke, one of the things that I was trying to get across was this idea that I think justice is actually really strongly at the heart of the gospel. It's not the only thing, but without understanding how Jesus puts justice together with faith. So following Christ has this aspect of justice, where if we follow Christ, we will be concerned for our fellow human and how they are, materially as well as spiritually. Based on what I said this morning, do you have anything you want to add or question about that? In Warkworth, I had someone that came along to the seminar because she didn't like my title when I said, God doesn't want your worship if you're not into justice, in the little blurb. She didn't like that and wanted to engage. And we had a really, really good conversation around exactly what that means. But is there anyone wants to comment or add or subtract to that kind of stream of thought? Do you have any comments on that? Do you think it's right that justice and faith go together like that?
I think you need to give some definition of justice.
Yeah, good point.
Before you ask that question.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. Let's hold that a sec. I want to come back to it.
I was actually quite interested in the
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Right. So you've got the question of definition. Yeah. So if we're talking about preach the good news to the poor, we've got to know who that is. If we're talking about working for justice, what does it actually look like? Would we recognize justice if we saw it? And what you think of justice will, of course, determine the actions that you take, right? Yeah, no, I like that. So actually, I'll go back to those definitions in a sec. Is there anyone else that had any thoughts about that question of justice and faith coming together? Yeah.
I have a small group I link up with on Facebook, but frequently I get petitions to sign.
Okay.
It might be for Greenpeace, it might be for this, it might be for that, and I think that's become more like many years ago Amnesty International that we used to have these big campaigns and so on. But I think that is one aspect of justice that's in some of our lives. I think some of these signing just discovered all that. So I find I have to double think whether I just automatically do it, or is this a genuine thing, or is it something that's in my life?
Interesting. Thank you for that.
Yep. When you look at the last mark of mission, which is the egg.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
We have looking after the world and caring creatively.
Sorry, we're talking about the last of the 5 marks of mission for Anglicanism is caring for creation. Mm-hmm.
And so on.
Yeah, maybe stand up whenever you speak. Thank you. We'll improvise here.
The last element in mission, or the last mark of mission, is caring for God's creation and looking after the resources of the world. I think we just need to clarify whether, when talking about justice, we are talking about that whole range of issues under that heading, or whether our idea of justice is more a question of fairness between people and groups.
Sure. Okay. Yep. You're really speaking my language. I'm a big time environmentalist. But, so if we go on, let's look at that question of what do we mean by justice? What are some words or some ideas that are associated with the word justice? When we say the word justice, what springs to mind? How would you kind of unpack that? Fairness. Okay. Yeah. Fairness is very strongly related to justice. A guy who is thought of as being the top political philosopher of the 20th century, John Rawls, wrote a book called Justice as Fairness, and it's very much that kind of concept. Yeah.
But I think in terms of the Christian viewpoint, it's that whole year of Jubilee.
Okay.
Fairness is not about equal opportunity.
Okay. Yeah.
And sometimes we get caught up in that Western way of thinking. Fairness equals equal opportunity, but it's not, because fairness is about giving people the opportunity, and sometimes people need more opportunity than other people.
Okay.
And
so no one left behind, that sort of thing. Yeah. Okay.
In terms of a Christian framework,
yes.
Justice more than fairness.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, because that's part of that story of reconciliation, of God bringing all things to Himself.
My sociology teacher said fairness depends on, in my system, he said it depends what you're looking at.
Okay.
Who says is fair, what person is fair, the other says it's not fair.
It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, because where we stand in the socioeconomic spectrum is probably going to determine really strongly what we think of as fairness as well. And that's just I think it's just a characteristic of being in a fallen world, is that our thinking about fairness is often framed according to our own interest. It's something that we really need to, I think, keep on dealing with.
Background and where you come from.
Yes, exactly.
And we have to recognise that we are part of the rich West, the top 10% of the world. And that part of what we have, the comforts that we experience are at we have because of a history of oppression of indigenous people groups.
Yeah. Right, exactly. So, yeah, and that's something we haven't mentioned yet, is that whole question of the Indigenous people as well, yeah. Is there anyone that hasn't spoken yet who wants to throw anything in around that question of what is justice?
I was thinking about what is right.
Okay.
So, what is, I guess, the right thing to do for that person.
Yeah, okay. Yes, okay, yep. Yeah, yeah. I think, so the word right, there's a Māori word for putting something right, tika, which is one of their words for justice. It's the idea of if something is out of sync, out of balance, we put it back into balance. And actually that, I think, in some ways is a really nice kind of summary of the story of what I often call the arc of justice through Scripture, where the prophets are always calling people back to two things. Firstly, to stop idolatry, and also to stop injustice. And they've often put those things together really strongly. And it is really that call to create societies where, as we're saying, no one is left behind. That doesn't mean everybody is equal, of course, in terms of wealth. That's one way of thinking about justice. I think that's maybe the socialist, very strongly socialist way. Doesn't tend to work particularly well to push it that far. But I think with a biblical concept of justice is more the case that while some people could be richer than others, more powerful than others, it shouldn't be the case that where you sit in that spectrum makes your life go bad in a way that is not something that someone who was born in a different spectrum their life would go. So, in other words, if you to anyone in society, you would know that even if you were poor, that you wouldn't be so poor, you wouldn't be so absent of opportunities that you yourself couldn't create a good life with yourself and within your community. So injustice really is where those structures get so solidified that structural injustice, that intergenerational injustice keeps on carrying on. And I think that's one of Jesus's really strong emphases that he's making. What I'd like to do is just ask this question of where is how do you sort of tune into injustice yourself? And I want to open that question up just by getting you again, and just in pairs, to share with someone a very quick story of when you yourself had something happen to you that you felt was really unjust. So not a story of a situation that you saw someone else going through and that's really on your heart, but something that you, and it could be in your childhood or it could be really recently, you yourself really knew that this was an unjust. And what was the feeling? Try and dig out what that feeling was. What were some of the feeling words there? What were some of the feelings you had that tipped you off that this was a bad situation? How did it feel? Anger. Okay. Yep. Anger. Yeah. Anger is a really powerful one. Yep. Saddened. Yeah. Okay. Anger. Sadness. Yep. Rage. Yep. Right. Anger taken to the max. Yep. Yep. Aggrieved. Yeah. Okay. Aggrieved. Right. So that sense of, I can't believe that's happened to me. Yeah.
Lack of empowerment.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Disempowered. Yeah. Powerless. Thank you. Hurt. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think that's pretty much the full spectrum, really, eh? Say again? Undervalued. Yep. Okay, nice. I like that. Confused. Yep. Frustrated. Yeah. Frustrated is a good one too. The reason I asked you to do that is that I really believe that often we wake up to our sense of injustice in the world because we've experienced that ourselves. Benjamin Franklin said that injustice will never be challenged until those who are not affected by a problem feel it as strongly as those who are affected. And I think waking up our sense of where have we been hurt? What did that feel like? What were the feelings? And all those feelings of rage and anger, I think, and those are the touch points. That's how we know that there's a problem. If you saw someone at school if you were at school and you saw someone being beaten up, you wouldn't be just sort of rationally thinking, oh, that probably hurts, so it's probably a bad thing and I should do something about it. You actually feel it, right? It's visceral. It's molecular. You feel it in your body. You feel it. And that's how I think we wake up to that question. What I'd like to do is...
I think you probably do need to add deprivation.
Deprivation? Okay.
Because, Aristotle talked about justice in terms of distribution and compensation. When you come to compensation, if you've suffered a wrong and you're not being compensated for it,
right,
your sense of grievance is huge, but it's a different sort of grievance.
And of course a subset of justice, big picture, is what we call restorative justice, or the whole thing that our justice departments try to do, which is when someone has inflicted a harm, we want to either restore it or punish. So there's that sense of bringing it back and restoring the balance. Just want to finish off with just a couple of things. One of them is just to highlight a few tools and opportunities for taking your church or even asking the question of where do I fit into this picture of justice. It's one of the things that Te Whan's really interested in doing is just journeying with churches who actually want to take this question more seriously, not only for overseas justice, but actually justice in their own communities and the dislocation in their own communities. So, one of the first things I'd say about that is I think it's really important when it comes to engaging with community to do it together. And we heard from Sam was this morning on stage during the interview, was basically saying that it was really powerful for him to have a church with him, because other community groups might just be little trusts around the edges trying to get volunteers, and he has a whole great church full of volunteers. So that whole question of asking this question in your church, how do we together journey to our community? When I first switched on to this question, I was in my early 20s. I went to a conference. It was a Baptist Social Services conference. I only went there because there was this girl I was interested in. And I didn't get the girl, but I actually did end up getting really switched on to this question. And I went back to him, how are we doing in the community? And he said, well, a few people are doing some isolated things, but no one's really drawing it together. And he looked at me and said, do you want to do that? And so suddenly I was put in that role, sort of eventually officially in the church, to bring together those things. And so that's how it started for me. And it was about making sure that I didn't become a lone ranger. That we tried to draw on the church itself as well. And the other thing I wanted to say is that Te Whan has a bunch of tools which we've imported from our partners, both Te Whan UK, who are enormous, but also the overseas partners that both Te Whan UK and Te Whan New Zealand have worked with, because what they find is because they're doing community development a lot, they come up with a whole lot of tools, a whole lot of ways of doing that. And it's a little bit like what Mick Duncan was saying, actually. A lot of it is around putting out that bid and seeing what happens, or responding to the bids that others are putting to you. And so we've put that together as a course called the Discovery Course. So if this is something you're interested in having Te Whan come to maybe help your church look at that question, we're really happy to do that. What I want to do to finish off is just ask the question of how do you figure out what it is that you're being called to do specifically? Because as I said before about my analogy of the mosquito in the nudist colony, you just sometimes don't know where to start. There's just so much, right? So much need. What I want to do is just finish off by just showing you just a 1-minute video, which I really like, and especially I often show this to young people, because it's mostly actually about the next generation, I think. But I think it's true for all of us. This is the worst place to show a video, in the middle of a very light tent. But luckily, the words on the screen are actually not the important thing. If you just listen to the words, that should not, or try something else.
I am part of a lost generation, and I refuse to believe that I can change the world. I realize this may be a shock, but happiness comes from within is a lie, and money will make me happy. So in 30 years, I will tell my children they are not the most important thing in my life. My employer will know that I have my priorities straight because work is more important than family. I tell you this, once upon a time, families stayed together. But this will not be true in my era. This is a quick fix society. Experts tell me 30 years from now, I will be celebrating the 10th anniversary of my divorce. I do not concede that I will live in a country of my own making. In the future, environmental destruction will be the norm. No longer can it be said that my peers and I care about this earth. It will be evident that my generation is apathetic and lethargic. It is foolish to presume that there is hope. And all of this will come true unless we choose to reverse it. There is hope. It is foolish to presume that my generation is apathetic and lethargic. It will be evident that my peers and I care about this earth. No longer can it be said that environmental destruction will be the norm. In the future, I will live in a country of my own making. I do not concede that 30 years from now, I will be celebrating the 10th anniversary of my divorce. Experts tell me this is a quick fix society, but this will not be true in my era. Families stayed together once upon a time. I tell you this, family is more important than work. I have my priorities straight because my employer will know that they are not the most important thing in my life. So in 30 years, I will tell my children, money will make me happy is a lie, and true happiness comes from within. I realize this may be a shock, but I can change the world, and I refuse to believe that I am part of a lost generation.
So it all depends on which way we run the tape, right? I like that because it really does sort of highlight that our partnering with Christ is really a choice. Are we going towards that or not? And our church is going to be part of that.